Hi, hello. Good evening to all parents and students. I believe there will be some students who actually join this session together with your parents. Okay, so good evening to everyone. Okay, good to see all of you all here. Now, before we start, let me just introduce ourselves. I'm teacher James, and together with me is teacher Chang Heng. Right? Yeah. So both of us actually we teach secondary mathematics. So from Sec 1 to Sec 4. And myself and Chang Heng, we also teach both mathematics as well as additional mathematics. Now, tonight's session is specially catered for our parents, right? So the intent here is really to provide all our parents with the insight and a better understanding of the O-level mathematics, so that you can better appreciate, what your child is actually, going through in their learning journey, as well as we'll also be covering some of the examination requirement as well, so that you can have better appreciation of what is the expectation, and so that you can actually better support, your child. So in tonight's session, we'll also be sharing some helpful tips, in terms of what are some of those typical challenges that, student may tend to face, and how actually it can be overcome. Okay, so I think that is actually an overview of what we are going to cover tonight. Okay, but of course, let's feel free to make this session interactive. So if there's any question or if there's anything that I'd like to clarify, yeah, do feel free to actually, speak to us, you can type into the chat, and we'll be here to help to, provide the clarity for everyone. Okay, so let me just pull out the slide here. Okay, Chang, you can see the slide.
Can see.
Okay, can all right. Okay, yeah, so yeah, once again, yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time to join us. Okay. Now, so like I mentioned, this is the overview of what we'll be covering later on. So we will make this, as much as possible, interactive session. So feel free to interact and let us know if there's any question. Now, to start off, I would last like to highlight, which I believe all you will agree, that actually mathematics, just like English, is a very important subject. Um, just like, for example, when a student who enter primary school, right, and all the way until secondary school, you will notice that mathematics is a compulsory subject. Okay, so it's an important subject, not just because of anything else, but in terms of the requirement to proceed to post-secondary education. You will notice that many of the courses do require mathematics as a as a requirement. So doing well in mathematics is actually very important, right? In order for us to have a good score, and then you have greater choices of the kind of courses that you will take. Now, in terms of the O-level mathematics, the exam will cover everything that they will have learned from all the way from Sec 1 to Sec 4. Okay, so while predominantly the assessment and the exam will actually cover the Sec 3 and 4 topic, but Sec 1 and Sec 2 topic will also be covered. Okay, and for math is actually one of those subjects that is very much a skill-based subject. So meaning to say, you need to practice very regularly and also appropriately in order to master the key skill that is required for each of the topic. So it's just like sports, so the more you play the particular sports, the better you become, right? Because these are actually skills based. So math is the same thing. And I will actually want to highlight about this thing about practice regularly and also appropriately. Okay, now what we mean by appropriately is that when you practice, it's important that you practice the correct method, the correct presentation, the right approach. Okay. Well, some students, they actually know how to do a certain math sum, but the way they actually approach it or the way they present the working may not be the most ideal. Okay. So they may not show everything very clearly, or they actually shortcut certain steps. So all these things is important that we should practice appropriately, correctly. So that, because otherwise, if you use the wrong approach, or the not a good approach to practice, and the more you practice, then you end up reinforcing all the bad habits. Okay. So therefore, when you practice regularly, it's also important that you must also practice in a correct, appropriate manner. Okay. Now later we will share a bit more details as to some of those pitfalls with regard to this aspect. Okay, the next thing that I will want to actually maybe share for all parents to be aware is that there's actually a slight change in the uh, assessment scheme over the years. So I mean, for some of y'all who may have actually older children who have taken the O-level exam a couple of years back. So actually, you will know, if you all have noticed that actually there's some slight change. Wow, the scope of the exam is largely the same, okay, in terms of topic and the content that they're covering. But in terms of the scheme of assessment, okay, there are some changes. So if you were to actually working with your child in terms of practicing the 10-year series, you will notice that um, the exam from 2022 and earlier, okay, they actually follow this syllabus 4048, okay. So from 2023 onwards, then they switch to 4052. Okay, so that is the change over this recent year. So this essentially affect mostly more in terms of the sim of assessment. Okay, not so much in terms of content. So let me show you and let everyone understand exactly what has been the change. Now, in the case of those who actually, if you look at the 10 series, the earlier years from 2022 and earlier, you will notice that actually there are actually, for the two papers, um, paper one, actually the total mark is 80, okay? And paper two, the total mark is 100. So because of the difference in the marks, so the duration of the exam is also slightly different. Okay, so one is 2 hours, the other one is 2 hours, 15 minutes. But the weightage is the same, okay, 50%, 50%, all right? But currently, your child will be actually taking the current syllabus, the 4052. So the assessment, as you can see from my screen here, is actually slightly tweaked. Okay, you'll find that the both paper will now have equal duration. Okay, total marks also the same. Both are 90 marks in total. And then the weightage is 50% each. Okay, so there's some slight adjustment in the number of questions, but not too much. Basically, the number of questions is about the same. But the total mark and the weightage as you can see from the screen. Now, so you may see that there's this slight tweak, but actually what is the implication of this? Okay. So in this case here, if you do a simple math, you will able to notice that in the past, paper one is only 80 marks, but the weightage accorded is 50%. Okay. So actually, if you to compare, actually the paper one actually has a higher weightage than paper two, okay, in the past. But now this has been actually even up. Okay, so both paper one and paper two are now equal weightage. So your performance in the both paper now carry equal weightage. Okay, so they actually remove that unequal weightage that actually happened when it was based on the 4048 syllabus. Okay, so that is something that actually has changed slightly over the recent years. Okay, so let's look into a bit more detail into the paper one. Okay, now paper one will be typically all those short questions, mostly some with 1 mark or 2 mark question. And there are also some slightly longer questions that actually range from maybe 3 to 6 marks, 7 marks. Okay, so that's for the paper one. So paper one usually a question that is generally a bit more less complicated. So I think it's important that as your child prepare for the O-level examination, it's important that they must try to score as high as possible for paper one. Okay, so when it comes to paper two, the question will get a bit longer and also a bit more complicated. Okay, so generally the question can range from 10 to 30 marks for the longer one. Okay, shorter one will be around 6 to 8 months. Okay, so that is the typical range. And of course, in paper two, there's always this particular question that a lot of students don't enjoy doing. Okay, this is what we mean by the PRWC question. Okay, so the question that is based on real world context, a real world scenario. So later we'll also be sharing a bit more with regard to this particular type of question. Okay, and how actually we can actually go about to better tackle it. Okay, so this is the type of question that you can expect to see for paper two. Now, in terms of the content-wise, okay, the content-wise, all the way from Set 1 to Set 4, okay, the child will be actually um, learning different mathematical topic. But we will actually, under the MOE syllabus, actually they are being categorized into these three broad category, or what we call content strength. Okay, so namely your numbers and algebra as one group, your geometry and measurement, as well as your statistic and your probability. Okay, these are the three main group of topic that they will be actually learning. Later I will actually share with you to let you have better understanding in terms of exactly what are those topics that fall under each one of these category. Now, cutting across all these three main broad category is what we call the mathematical processes. Okay, now meaning to say when your child is um, learning your secondary mathematics and eventually take the O-level exam, okay, apart from knowing the mathematical concept and all the technical details pertaining to each topic, okay, they will also be tested based on their mathematical reasoning, communication, as well as the ability to apply the mathematical concept and technique in a different scenario. Okay, so that is actually under this medical process. Okay, whereby students are expected to not just know how to calculate, derive the solution. Okay, but there will be an expectation that they must be able to demonstrate that they're able to use mathematical reasoning and also to communicate, the result, to explain what is the significance of the result and what does it mean. Okay, so this is broadly, in terms of what your child will be actually expected to be able to perform at the O-level exam. Now, the next slide that I want to show you, you can see from here that actually there are the different topics that actually fall under each of the three content strength. Okay, so topics like your ratio, your percentage, all the algebraic expression, function and graph, and so on. All these are fall under this category as numbers and algebra. Okay, geometry and measurement will be your topics like property of circles, congruency, measuration, and so on, including vectors. Okay, and of course, probability and statistic is just focusing on data analysis as well as on probability. Okay, so these are the different topics and how they are being classified. Now, for all these topics that we have just shown you, right? Your child will not be learning them in one particular year. Okay, so the mastery of each of these topics are expected to be across all the 4 years of education, 4 or 5 years, depending on whether the child is in G3 or in G2. Okay, now in the case of you can see actually over here on this slide here, you can see that in terms of some topics, they started to learn in Sec 1, okay, and they will continue to learn it in Sec 2, okay, so they have not learned everything yet, so the content is actually being spread out and across Sec 1 and Sec 2, and in some topic, it can go all the way until Sec 3, okay, like for example, your equation and inequalities, you will see that actually Sec 1 they started to learn, okay, they will continue to deepen the technical content in Sec 2 and eventually complete learning everything in Sec 3. Okay. And of course, there are also some topic that will only they will only start learning in Sec 4. Okay. Like example, like your matrices and your all those fun topic like vectors. Okay. So these are how actually the different topics are being covered and being spread over across the different years. Okay, so this slide is just to give you that broad overview to help everyone to have a better appreciation of what your child will be learning or have been learning over the years and in the coming year, depending on whether your child is in Sec 3 or in Sec 4 now. Now, this is the problem in the real world context, okay, what we call the PRWC style question, okay, that I mentioned to you, which many students actually don't really enjoy doing. Okay, now let me share a bit more to let all parents here to better appreciate what this style question is about and why actually many students don't really enjoy. Okay, now myself and teacher Shang Heng, I think we have actually been um, helping and working with many batches of students who have successfully gone through the O-level exam. Okay, and often we have seen I've seen students who actually try to shun away from this style question. Okay, they will either do this at the last question, or some students they may actually just totally thinking of giving up on such question. Okay. Now, what this type of question is about is that they actually can be based on a lot of real world context, everyday life. So it can be based on a case study that is based on maybe travel plans, or maybe on transport related content, or it could be based on even recipe, cooking, or it can be based on renovation, you know renovation. So you need to know the floor plan, and they'll give some details with regard to the renovation and so on. So it can also be involved in terms of financial related. Okay, it could be based on utility bills, money exchange. Just to go for travel, then there'll be need to consider money, currency exchange and so on. So this type of question they can base on many different contexts. So in a way, it's challenging to most students because they find it a bit hard to kind of prepare, because there's no so-called unlike some other topic, right, whereby you can get some familiarity as you practice more. But for such question, because it can be based on many different contexts, so it become a bit hard to prepare, and they wouldn't not almost anything can be actually tested. But typically it will come from everyday life and things that they may actually relate to. Now, such questions are usually in terms of dealing with such question, um, students are expected to be able to apply all the different types of topics that they have learned. Okay, so while the context may not be something that they have experienced before or encountered, okay, but to deal with such question, they will actually be able to handle it, because they will still be testing them on those topics that they have learned. Okay, so some part of the question may require their knowledge on percentage, on ratio, okay, on interest, compound interest that they have learned. So they will actually have to actually combine all the knowledge that they have learned. So including geometry as well. So they may actually, depending on how the question is being tested, is being phrased, and the context of it. So they will need to apply accordingly the appropriate topic, okay, to handle such question. So this is where I think most students sometimes find it a bit challenging, because there's no fixed method. Okay, a lot of time depends on what the question is asking and the context of it. Okay, but nonetheless, this question is something that students should not miss, because the question usually would take up 11 to 13 marks. Okay, very high weightage. Okay, but the good thing about this type of question is that they are usually being break up into different parts. Okay, and then it is a way guided. Okay, later I will show you an example of such question. Okay, to let all parents to have some better appreciation exactly what this is like. Okay, and this question on PRWC, it can actually appear in paper 1 or paper 2. Okay, paper 1 will be usually a shorter version. So in paper 2, typically this question will appear as the last question in paper 2. Okay, yeah. And one other thing that I will also later show you for this such question is that in terms of the computation and the calculation of such question, there will be a requirement for student to interpret the result. Okay, so it's not just about deriving the answer and through calculation, but also there's an expectation for them to actually be able to learn how to interpret and to also justify their result. Okay, so later I will share more details on that. Now, coming to the next part on apart from the syllabus and the scope of their exam, okay, as they prepare for the O level. Now, to give everyone a better understanding in terms of the assessment. Now, in the assessment, the different question that is covered in paper 1 and paper 2, they are actually differentiated, whereby there will be some question that is more of the routine type of question, whereby if you have done your due diligence, if you have learned all the necessary technique, you should be able to do such question. Okay, so that is what we call the AO1 type of question. Okay, whereby you are expected to use and apply standard technique to solve the question. Okay, so this will be the more routine kind of question that most students should be able to do. Okay, so the weightage for such question is about 45%. Okay, so this is across both paper 1 and paper 2. Now, when it comes to the AO2 type of question, this will be involved question that is more on the application type. So they are expected to then be able to solve the question in a variety of contexts. Okay, so whether it's what topic it is, no matter which topic, they can actually accept the question in different contexts. But students are still expected to be able to know how to apply the technique appropriately in the context that's given to them. Okay, so this will be more the application type of question. And that will take up about 40%, okay, in terms of weightage wise. So the remaining 15%, okay, so that will be actually the last category. This will be the more demanding type of question, okay, that require students to be able to reason and to also to communicate mathematically, okay, in terms of their solution. So such questions are typically those questions that require them to explain, okay, so not just to calculate and derive the answer, but to be able to explain their solution. Okay, or to be able to justify or even to compare, for example. So such questions are typically of such nature, and student this is where in the exam they will kind of differentiate, student who, the average student from the strongest student. Okay, so these are the how they actually organize in terms of the level of difficulty of question that you can expect, okay, in the paper. Now, another thing that I wanted to also share with everyone is in terms of some of the trends in the O-level mathematics. So just to let all parents here to actually have some understanding on this. Now, in terms of question-wise, there will be actually question, like I mentioned to you, that require them to explain. And of course, increasingly over the years, we do see that such question is actually getting more prevalent. So they are required to explain and to also justify, especially for the PRWC question. They do need to justify the result that they obtain. Then for paper 2, okay, paper 2. Now, this one has been quite consistent for many years. The first question of paper 2 is typically based on algebra. Okay, based on algebra. Okay, and for questions that involve graph plotting, right, it will appear in paper 2. Okay, typically found in paper 2. So as a child prepare for the exam, okay, it's actually useful to take note of some of this. Okay, and of the 3 category of content strength that we talked about just now, actually the number algebra is the one that has got the highest weightage. Okay, while your probability and statistic has the least weightage. Okay, so later I will also be sharing with you in terms of what exactly is this weightage. Right. Now, let's look at some example, okay, in terms of what are some of those questions that involve explanation. Okay, so I'm going to show you on my screen here. an example of that. So this one is taken from the 2023 paper. Okay, it's paper one question. Okay, so the first part, you notice this question here is based on algebra. They're supposed to do find the value of the n. But you notice that in the second part, after you apply the technique and you do a computation, you're supposed to explain, okay, in this case here, why when x equals 6, right, your expression will have a minimum value. So that means the question did not actually ask them to compute what is the minimum value, but instead, they are being asked to explain why is that so. Okay, so this is just to give everyone an idea how some of this kind of question can be set, okay, and how they are being like. Okay, so this is another example. This question is taken from 2022. So it's actually based on simple interest and compound interest. Okay, so instead of asking them to compute what is the interest and so on, is the question asked for explain why, for example, in this case, account B is the better choice. Okay, so when students answer such question, they should not do this like in English comprehension. Okay, so they will write down, in terms of text, explain based on the concept and so on. They're expected to actually use calculation to support and justify their explanation. Okay, so a lot of time we always will tell a student, wherever they ask you to explain, it's not just like in comprehension, you write down everything in text and you explain, verbally, but actually you need to do calculation, okay, to be able to justify and to support and to substantiate, your result to explain. Okay, so this is another example to show everyone. And over here, the next one you see over here, this is, okay, I think maybe the word may be a little bit small, but this is actually an example of a PRWC question. Okay, so just now we have been sharing a bit more on what this PRWC question that a lot of students don't enjoy. So over here, you can see this is from 2021, okay? So this particular question is based on a context that student may not necessarily have any prior experience before, okay? But the question will provide the necessary context for student to be able to understand and appreciate, okay? And there could be various data given in the question that they are expected to apply their data analysis skill, okay, and interpretation. And the question will break out into different parts, and the calculation involved is something that, although the context is something that they may not be familiar with, they may not have seen before, but definitely they are equipped with the ability to do the calculation, okay? Because the calculation can involve any of the topic that they have learned so far in their syllabus, all the way from Set 1 to Set 4, okay? So in terms of calculation-wise, definitely they will know, they should be able to have the skill to do that. So the question is really to be able to, for them to apply accordingly, which is the relevant calculation, relevant topic that they should apply in terms of addressing the question. Okay, and you will notice over here that which are highlighted in yellow, you will see the word justify your decision. So the question would need them to actually propose and to decide. So from the calculation, they will then have to determine which is the better decision, okay, and to justify it. Okay, so the justification is involve their calculation to support and substantiate their recommendation or their decision, and to be able to explain and to justify. Okay, so this is an example of how a PWC question looks like. Okay, and yeah, just to give all parents, a better appreciation and idea of this is what the child will be going through when come to this type of question. Okay. Now, the other thing that we talked about just now was the first question of paper 2, right? Is actually typically based on algebra. Okay. Now, over here, actually, I have pulled up some of those typical questions that they will tend to get as a first question from paper 2. Okay, so over here, these are just some example. Okay, these are all topics that they have learned previously, including some from lower secondary. Okay, and they can be tested here. Okay, as the first question. Okay, for example, to simplify an algebraic expression or to solve an equation. All right, so this is some example of this, and typically, it will come from topics such as on those, for example, simultaneous equation or the linear inequalities, which are all the Sec 2 topics, okay, and as well as some Sec 3 topic as well, right? So what they learn in Sec 1 and Sec 2 actually something that they need to also revise, so that they do not forget, and because the scope of the exam will cover everything from Sec 1 to Sec 4. Now, this is the slide that I want to show everyone in terms of the weightage across the different, the three category of content strand. So over here, actually, what we have done is that actually we have tabulated over the years in terms of the weightage of those questions that come from each of the three category. So you will see that actually the variation over the years is actually pretty consistent. Okay, not too much of a variation. So, like for example, your numbers and algebra, you will notice that actually it's actually range from 50+%. Okay, 50+% will actually of the weightage come from this category of topic. Okay, numbers and algebra. So, number algebra is the one that has got the highest weightage, and you can also see quite clearly that your statistic and probability is the one among the three is the one with the lower weightage. Okay, lower weightage, but it's actually still quite consistent. It typically range about 10 plus minus percent. So that is across over the years. Okay, so this is something to share to let everyone have some idea in terms of the focus. So clearly numbers and algebra is something that student must try to pay attention to, as well as the geometry and measurement, because these two take up a very high weightage of the overall total marks. All right. Okay, so I think with that, I will actually pause here. And of course, if you have any question, feel free to let us know. So the next segment onwards, I will let teacher Chang Heng to share with you a bit more in terms of some of those typical challenges that some students may face, and then some tips that actually we'll be providing. Okay, so I will hand over to teacher Chang Heng.
Okay, thank you, Teacher James. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, can you all see my screen? Teacher James, can you see?
Yes, can.
Okay, can. Okay, so here, okay, the question here is, okay, now we want to know, right? For examples, okay, so yes, after a few many years of teaching the students, we actually noticed that there are some problems usually faced by the Sec 3 and O-level math students here. Okay, so generally, we'll be going through some of the pointers here that are problems that usually faced by our Sec 3 and O-level math students here. So, pointed things like, okay, so a lot of students, okay, when we actually went through teaching with them, we do notice that students, most of them they actually came in with poor foundation with their Sec 1 and Sec 2 topics. Okay, so because of this weak foundation, this leads to a challenge, okay, in scoring well for the Sec 3 and Sec 4 topics. Okay, because all Sec 3, Sec 4 topics, they are actually related to whatever they have learned, okay, earlier in the lower secondary. Okay, so we will go through some of the challenges that they face. And the next point that we want to go to, point two, is on how to help help your child to revise for their math, okay, in Sec 3 and Sec 4. Okay, and also because as mentioned by our teacher James just now, he already showed you some examples of the PRWC types of questions. Okay, so this is usually found on the last question or paper two. Okay, so it also takes in quite a lot of marks here. Okay, just now the one that we've seen, it usually takes about 9 to 10 marks. Okay, so we want to also make our ensure our students excels in doing these kind of questions also. Okay, so we will also go through some of the scoring strategies, and also point four, mental blocks, and also things like remember formulas. Okay, because in math there's a lot of formulas, so we will see how we can help. Okay, to help your child to remember all those formulas required, and also important things like time management, right? Because some exam is actually very stressful for your child. Okay, so good time management, okay, will actually allows them, okay, to make sure that they plan and do the questions um with a certain within a certain managed time here, and to also make sure that they have time, okay, to check their careless mistakes here. Okay, and the last part that I'll be going through will be about the in terms of the presentations, accuracy, and units here. Okay, there are some common errors that we actually notice that most of the students will make here. Okay, so we will also go through those so that can help you to identify all these errors in your child's work here. Okay, so the first thing that I mentioned about the first point here, right? Okay, so what are the things that actually covered in Set 1, Set 2 here? Okay, so these are the chapters, as you can see from the screen. Okay, in Set 1, okay, there's actually a revision of things that they actually learn in primary school. Things like percentage, things like number patterns, things like polygons. Okay, these are actually things that they have learned in primary school, and it's being recapped in Set 1, right? And as you can see for algebra, okay, in secondary school, okay, so they have moved on to do learn all those um things in algebra. Okay, so it's actually heavily covered in secondary school now. Algebra identities, algebra fractions and formulas. Okay, these are also covered in both Set 1, but most of the focus is actually in Set 2. Okay, so these two things that they have learned in Set 1, Set 2, okay, it may not be recapped in your Set 3 here, okay, including volumes and surface area also. This is also covered in Set 1, Set 2. Okay, so these topics, they are actually covered in both Set 1 and Set 2, but not necessarily be recapped in Set 3 because there will not be a standalone topic on these topics here. But okay, when you are doing revisions, okay, when we are actually covering other topics, sometimes because these are actually the foundation for other topics. Okay, so this will also be revisited, but there will not be a standalone chapter just to recap on all this. So we will build on things that has been learned in this Set 1, Set 2, okay, and revisit in the new chapter that is learned in Set 3, Set 4. Right. Okay. For example, in Set 3, we will learn things like congruence and similarities. Right. Congruence and similarities is comparing shapes also. So we will also revisit a bit of like volumes and surface area that was taught in Set 1, Set 2. Okay. So these are actually some of the foundations that they need to know and understand so that they can move on to learn the new topics in Set 3 and Set 4. Right. So these are actually some of the chapters that requires recapping here. Okay. So this is important. So as you know that, okay, so since we say that actually all those seven subject two topics will also be covered in O levels, right? So it is actually best, okay, for your kids. Okay, so I know that okay, the school holiday has just passed, okay, but it's actually now still the beginning of Sec 3 or Sec 4, right? So they can still take time, okay. So if they have time, okay, it's actually advisable for them to go and first revise all the Sec 2 algebra topics. Okay, algebra topics is actually taught, right? Focusing in secondary school. Okay, so this is very new to them. So if you notice that your child is still very weak in algebra, so it is actually advisable for for the parents to help, right, your child to let them revise all those topics that they have learned so far in the Sec 2 algebra topics. And for our curriculum, okay, so if your child has been with us, okay, since Sec 1, Sec 2, okay, so they actually can, okay, make sure that they take out all those Sec 1, Sec 2 papers that they have gone through so far. And if they have not finished all the homework boosters, so it would be advisable that they can use them as a revision for now, so that because we know that it's important for them to recap on their own. Okay, because there will no, as mentioned, there will be no standalone chapter that will go and revise all these topics that is required. Okay, so if you notice that the foundation is still not very strong, okay, please feel free to go back to revise on those topics there. Okay, this is to strengthen their foundation in the lower secondary topics. Okay, and for those who are already in O levels, okay, Sec 4, okay, so you can, how do you want to revise for your Sec 3 topics and also O levels? Okay, because you already went through certain topics in Sec 3 already, right? So for those topics that you have already learned, okay, you can practice them using your 10-year series, right? Okay, you can choose those topical ones where they focus on all the same type of questions for the same topic. Okay, so you can practice those so that you can try to master and remember all those topics that you have learned in Sec 3, because Sec 4 topics will also rely on certain Sec 3 topics here, right? So please try to practice all those topics that you have learned so far in Sec 1 and Sec 3. Okay, so if you have already completed your TYS, okay, so do practice it again, okay, so that you can remember. Okay, math is all about practice, right? Okay, so okay, if you have your exam and textbook questions, okay, you can also use them, okay, as a reference for you to revise your previous segment and secondary topics that you have learned. Okay, okay, the next part here. Okay, so just now teacher James actually shared with us, right? Okay, so this is the question type of questions that students always find difficulty in scoring, right? So here I will share some so-called strategies lah. Okay, so some strategies that you can advise a child to adopt and see whether they can help. This will help them in this type of tackling this kind of PRWC type of questions. Okay, so generally, the problem faced is because there are actually not a lot of this type of practice questions, right? And just now as teacher James shared, right? Okay, this actually has been introduced in the new syllabus, okay, since 2002. So there, 2022. So this is something that your child may want to find more kind of references, okay, to practice on so that they can actually score well for this. So so far, okay, our advice here is, okay, they need to have ample practice, okay, at least 9 O-level questions, including the specimen question paper, okay, to practice on. Okay, so and you do find this type of questions usually, okay, in your school textbook also. Okay, usually it will be found at the last section. Okay, there will be a particular sections on all these kind of PRWC questions, okay, that you can practice on. Okay, so as mentioned by teacher James, okay, this type of question, okay, there are actually different many types of contexts, right? So the good way here, the best strategy here is actually to practice more so that you see more context. Okay, so that once your child is exposed to both more and more context here, then it's easier for them to attempt similar type of questions. Okay, wherever they see the same type of context here. Okay, so as I mentioned just now, okay, we see that the PRWC question is actually uh, divided into different parts here, right? So we have actually part A, part B, part C. Okay, so just now there was a PRWC question that was shown by teacher James, okay, on the bridge one, right? The cable stay bridges, right? So you do notice that part A, okay, is usually 1 to 3 marks. Part B also 1 to 3 marks. And then for the very last part, okay, where you have to decide and justify your decision here. Okay, the one will have more marks here. It usually contains 6 to 8 marks here. Okay, so if your child has problems, okay, solving this kind of problems, so at least, okay, what we advise here is at least they can actually score those the first 2 part here, right? Where they carries at least 1 to 3 marks here. Okay, so at least out of the 10 marks, right? Your child don't score a 0 marks, right? So it's so here we want to encourage them, okay, encourage them to at least, okay, attempt the first 2 part here so that they can at least score some marks for the PRWC questions. Okay, so that would be a first step. That would be a first step to encourage them to tackle such questions here. Okay, so they will need to read, right, the context thoroughly for the first few part, okay, so that they can score those easier marks there. Okay, so at least out of that, just now that question, maybe they can score 4 out of 10. Okay, that's not that bad, right? As compared to scoring nothing here. So this will also encourage and warm them up, right? To understand the context, okay, before they attempt, okay, to do the last part of the questions here. Okay, so okay, the strategy here is to make sure that they read the remaining context for the last part on the decision making. So remember, okay, that the method marks are will be still awarded, right, for correct methods. Okay, so in math, we will always give method marks and also answer marks. Okay, so what we want them to achieve here is at least, okay, they try to attempt and see that whether they can calculate some certain parts here. Okay, so once you show some calculations and if you manage to get the calculations correct, the methods, right? So if the method is correct, you will still get method marks, okay, regardless whether you get the final answer or the final decision correct here. Okay, so this will also want, okay, so strategy here is we also want to make sure that students think in terms of the real world context. Okay, so they need to come up with very reasonable assumptions, okay, when they make their decisions and support by the calculation that they made in the questions. Okay, so these are things that you can share with your child so that they make sure that they can actually attempt. Okay, the very first thing is to make sure that they are encouraged and ask them to attempt these type of questions so that at least, okay, they can score some marks and not loses all the 10 marks here. Okay, next part. Okay, talking about other problems. Okay, besides on the question itself, the difficulty of the question itself. Okay, there are other factors also. Things like what? Mental block. Okay, so sometimes always students always complain, yeah, I cannot remember these things, I cannot do these things. Why? Okay, the reason is because it's not about only learning the content here. So actually, there are actually things that they also needs to know the skills, right? As in, because you know that when they are taking exams, okay, it's not about whether you know the content well or not. Okay, so things like when you have lack of practice of exam type of questions, and also if you don't time yourself, right, when you do the exam questions. Okay, so these are things that you need to let your child, okay, be familiarized with, okay, to accustom to this kind of working with exam type of questions and also working within a certain time. Okay, this is important because the paper one and paper two, they are both 2 hours 15 minutes paper. Okay, so you need to actually time your child, okay, so that they will be able to handle those kind of pacing and stress during the exam, right? So, and another thing that may also cause this kind of mental block for them is because nowadays, okay, MOE encourages no more, uh, giving less exams here. Okay, so the removal of SA1 here may also create a culture shock, right? Because last time, okay, they used to have more regular exam, but now, okay, now they actually have less exams, so they may not be able to uh, accept this kind of culture shock here. Okay, so within a very short time, they have to adjust to the exam-oriented type of questions. Okay, so here, our solution here that we propose is to make sure that they at least complete 5 exam types of papers. So besides practicing your TYS, okay, and also at the same time, okay, we will also advise your child, okay, to practice on the MyStretcher SA papers. Okay, we actually also have mid-year, end of year papers. Okay, so every time we will have this. Also, in between, we also have some revision papers. Okay, so these are some of the papers that they can actually try out. Okay, so that they are more familiarized with the exam type of questions here. Oh, okay. I see your questions in the chat. Okay, I will share. Okay, I will share the time that we will recommend per questions here in my next slide here. Okay, I'll share it later. So after that, okay, so there's one thing that you need to know, because for math, right, we are actually talking about all the formulas here. There's a lot of formulas that the student needs to know and also remember for the exam. Okay, but in the exam here, there's actually formula sheet, a mathematical formula sheet, as you can see on the screen here. So there are some formulas that students, they do not need to remember. So here, okay, so you need to know what are those formulas. Your child needs to know what are those formulas that they can see from the mathematical formula sheet here. Like things like the compound interest formula. Okay, so and here we have a list of some of those shapes. Okay, be it the surface area, the volume, the arc length. Okay, there are some of these formulas, okay, that are actually found inside the formula sheet. Okay, so they do not need to memorize this. Okay, things like the trigo ratios, the SD, okay, the standard deviation formula, whereby a lot of students they cannot remember. Okay, so this one, okay, is all listed in the formula sheets. But of course, okay, there are other type of formulas that they still need to remember. Okay, this will also be um reminded, okay, during the class when we teach the students what are those formulas that they need to remember. Okay, things like, for example, Pythagoras theorem. Okay, so these formulas are not found in the formula sheets. Okay, so the student needs to know what are the formulas that they need to remember and what are those that can be found in the sheet. Okay, so that this also help them to offload some of the formulas that they need to remember. Okay, so yeah, to answer the questions from the ground here, yes. Okay, so this one we talk about time management here. So what is the advisable, okay, amount of time that we suggest here? Okay, because as mentioned, okay, we see that, okay, it's a 90 minutes, sorry, it's the 90 marks questions that they have to work within 2 hours, 15 minutes. So based on the ratio here, we see that, okay, generally, okay, so our advice here is if it's a 10 marks questions, okay, so do not spend more than 15 minutes. Okay, so on average is about, if you see that 1 mark, you should take about 1.5 minutes to complete. Okay, if you take more than that, means that, okay, you may not have sufficient time to complete the whole exam paper. Okay, so and another thing that we want to advise here is also because usually the graph paper will appear last. And graph paper, okay, is actually it also renders a lot of marks here. Okay, and it's not as difficult as what we have mentioned as compared to the PRWC type of questions. Graph question is actually quite manageable for most students. Okay, so it's a kind of low-hanging fruit. So we want to encourage students here, okay, to allocate some time. Okay, so usually a graph question could also be as like 10 marks question here also. So they have to plan at least about 15 minutes, okay, for them to have enough time to draw the graph. Okay, so do not ask your child to give up on drawing graph. So because there's actually a lot of practice for them on drawing graph. So this should be a easy question for them to tackle on, right? Okay, so but however, okay, because sometimes when they are asked to draw the straight line in the graph, right? So it still requires a bit of algebraic manipulations. Okay, so it's not as routine, okay, but it's still not as difficult, okay, when we compare this type of question with the PRWC type of questions. Okay, so it's advisable for them to spend some time on these graph questions. Okay. Okay, so this one, okay, I believe you guys, okay, so when you review your child question, you do always see a lot of careless mistakes, right? A lot of students, when they did not score well, okay, one of the most common problems here they face is because of the careless mistakes, right? Okay, firstly, it's because of the time management wise, okay, they do not have time to check. Okay, if they make sure that they do the questions, uh, okay, within the within the suggested amount of time, so they will have time to go and check on their questions here. Okay, so if they can check, they can identify their own careless mistakes. And okay, so if you notice that your child keeps repeating the same type of mistake here, so it's actually also advisable for you to help compile, okay, such careless mistake so that it reminds your your child here to make sure that they do not make the same type of careless mistake again. And okay, what we can do here, usually we will also advise, okay, do peer marking here. Okay, so actually the best way to learn is to identify other people's mistake. right? So if you are able to identify other people's mistakes, so this will help you learn. Okay, this will also serve you as a reminder that, oh, I don't want to repeat the same mistake as what my classmate makes here. Okay, so the next part, okay, the last part here actually talking about how do they present, okay, their workings so that so that to make firstly to ensure that there's no careless mistake and also to make sure that they present it the correct way here. Okay, so this is an example from a student. Okay, so you can see that this question is about asking them to find a certain percentage and then what is the equal amount of money here. So you do notice that here, okay, we circled this part here, the part where we circle all the equals here. So the reason why here this is considered the presentation wrong is because, okay, in terms of presentation, we do not use equal to represent a percentage. This percentage and this amount of money here is not equal. So percentage is not equal to money. So conceptually, this is not correct. Okay, so what we usually do here is instead of putting it as equal sign, we will use an arrow to represent. Okay, because the arrow means to represent. Okay, so this will be a more proper way to present the answers. Okay, so take note of this kind of presentation errors that your child had. Okay, so to avoid being penalized of any kind of presentation marks here. Okay, so here I have another example, okay, whereby we actually compares. Okay, if you look at the on the right side here, the working here, okay, it's the same thing here. Okay, so we do not use equal. Okay, equal is not the same. Okay, the first sentence is correct. Okay, with the first sentence when we find the difference between the angle, okay, this is correct. But however, once you want to represent your 205 degrees equates to the number of students here, 133. Okay, so conceptually, this is not correct here. Okay, we do not equate angles to the number of students, right? So say error that your child will make here. Okay. Okay, another thing. Okay, so this one we will also penalize if the answers is not given in its simplest form. Okay, so students are expected to write their answers in the simplest form here. So what when we say answers in simplest form means that we have to leave the answer in terms of either a decimal, 1.5, or a mixed number, 1.5. Okay, so if your child put the answer as an improper fraction, okay, which is 3 over 2. 3 over 2 is the improper fraction. Okay, so 3 over 2 is not considered as the simplest form. So 1 mark will be penalized, okay, if they do not put their answers as the simplest form here. Okay, so this is something to take note also. Okay, so and for accuracy wise, okay, so when they calculate, right, the answers, okay, we talk about accuracy here. Okay, so in the exam, they will state this, okay, because in for some calculations regarding the circles, okay, the value of pi will be used. So either they can use the calculator pi or 3.142 here. And for any answers, okay, non-exact answers, we're talking about non-exact answers. Non-exact answers means the answers keeps repeats in when you calculate things like 3.556678 and it goes on. Okay, these are considered non-exact numbers. Okay, so non-exact numbers they're expected to leave the answers in three significant figures. Okay, or in for angles they have to leave the degrees to one decimal place. Okay, so this one they have to take note now. But for exact answers, just give the exact answers, right? Okay, but there's exceptions. Okay, because angles is usually measured up to only one decimal place, money to two decimal place. Okay, money must be in two decimal place because it's in cents. Okay, so this will make sense to the context. So as mentioned, for non-exact numbers, okay, so it must be to three significant figures and one decimal place for angles. Okay, so take notes. And because for non-exact answers, right, when they are working with it, okay, in order not to lose the accuracy marks, so if you, okay, for final answer, they have to leave it three significant figures, but for the working answers, okay, so answers that they calculated in between, okay, the in-between workings, they should keep it as five significant figures. Okay, so it is only until they have to find the final answer, then they will correct it to three significant figures. And for angles, okay, it will be 3 dp, three decimal place. Okay, for money will be four decimal place. Okay, because degree will, the final answer will be corrected to one decimal place, and for money it will be two decimal place. Okay, so we are saying that we are always adding two more significant figures, okay, in for the in-between working answers, okay, to preserve the accuracy here. Okay, so that they will not lose any accuracy mark while working through the questions. Okay, so for units, right? Okay, so for units, okay, so the key thing here is to remember that, okay, so for degrees and percentage, okay, so for these two, degree and percentage, they need to make sure that they include. It's very important that they need to include the degree and percentage. Okay, why? Why is this unit required? Okay, because if they do not put in the correct unit for degree here, because in Sec 3 they learn something what we call the angles in degree and angles in radian. Okay, there's a difference between angles in degree mode and angles in radian mode. Okay, so if you put it's 111, okay, it could mean it's 111 radian here instead of 111 degree here. Okay, so there's a difference. So it's important that they put in the correct unit here. Okay, so and at the same time, okay, as mentioned, there's because in Sec 3 they learn both angles in degrees and angles in radian for trigo questions. So they also, when they are doing calculations, okay, so they must be mindful that because when you calculate using degree or radian using your calculator, okay, you give you different answers. So this is also something that they have. Your child has to make sure that they have to set the correct degree or radian mode when they are calculating the trigo questions here. And also to ensure that all the answers transferred to the answer blanks. Okay, otherwise, okay, there will also be result in penalty of marks. Okay, so remind your child to put in the answers on the answer line also. Okay, and because in secondary they can use calculators for both paper 1 and 2. So okay, since they're using calculators, so it will be useful, okay, for them to check answers to make sure that they do not have careless mistakes here. Okay, so there are actually ways, okay, so ways for them to use the calculator to check things like the quadratic equations, the solution to quadratic equations, solution to simultaneous equation, and also to check the mean and standard deviations. Okay, so different models, okay, different calculators models has different ways of um, checking the functions. So you may also want to make sure that ensure your child knows how to check all this, okay, before the exam. Okay, so when you use the calculator to check the answers, okay, ensure that, okay, when you are writing down, okay, so when we say that they can use it to check answer, doesn't mean that they do not show the working here. They still have to show the working on the papers. Okay, so the solution for quadratic should also shows how you factorize the quadratic formulas clearly. Okay, if not, okay, marks will not be given. And also for simultaneous equation, okay, they need to show how they do the elimination and substitution working clearly also. Okay, doesn't mean that you can find the solution, you just write the solution simply down. You still also need to show the working to get the method marks. Okay, just now we say that there's method marks also. So method is also important, the working is also important. And for also standard deviation, okay, so standard deviation usually okay, a lot of students will make careless mistake here because it's actually a long chain of data that they have to key in. So using the calculator to help them check the answers will actually help them, okay, to eradicate all those careless mistakes, okay, when they do the calculation here. Okay, so please ensure that they also write down the formula, the working clearly, okay, especially when the part worth 2 marks here. Okay, so the objective here, okay, so, okay, please okay, for us, for my structure here, our objective here is to make sure that we actually complete all the curriculums. Okay, 2 weeks before the September holidays. Okay, so things that will help students to consolidate their learnings are there are a lot of revision papers given to them, mock papers, and remember we also have the both mid-year checkpoint and end of year checkpoint to assess the students, okay, learning here. Okay, so here in my special, we also have two chapters. Okay, usually for November, December, just to prepare them for the new year. Okay, we will actually go through at least two chapters of the for the new year. Okay, so that they will start ahead of what they are going to learn in schools. Okay, so here, for our curriculum, okay, actually we have actually clearly demarcated all our questions with all those using things like stars, and also we have actually logos stating where are all those type of O-level simulated questions in our worksheets very clearly. Okay, so if you want to let them focus and practice more on those non-routines and O-level simulated type of questions, okay, you can look out for all this logos and symbols in our worksheets. They are all found, okay, within all our revision papers and also our topical papers. Okay, so to align learning with our simulated method process, okay, and to cultivate, okay, learning in students, okay, we will have at least one lessons on PRWCs, and okay, and also um just now teacher James also shared, right? There's actually three types: AO1, AO2, AO3. So AO3 types of questions is those that are you need to justify and explain. Okay, so we also include those type of questions within our weekly curriculums too. Okay, to help students to tackle those sort of more difficult type of questions. Okay, so with that, I have complete, okay, those problems that I've shared and also the strategies, okay, that you can use, okay, and try out with your child. Okay, so anyone has any questions?
Yeah, do feel free to let us know if there's any question that you would like to ask or to clarify. I mean, for this session, we hope to actually provide you all with some insight and better, understanding and some clarity, so that all parents, to help you all to be able to better support your child in their academic journey as they, prepare for the O-level exam. Okay, there's a question here. Oh, I see. PRWC. Okay, yes, problem in the real world context. Okay, so basically that's what it refers to. So these are the question that is a typically a long question that can be based on uh, different contexts. Okay, so something that students find it a bit hard to prepare because it can be based on any context, but it's very much a question that the student need to actually read very carefully to understand the information provided. So there will be a mix of information. Some include data analysis as well. There could be data given in the question. So they need to basically make use of all the knowledge that they have learned in the different topic, okay, to then decide which is the tool that they should take out from their bags of, technique that they have learned to apply to this type of question, okay? Yeah, so this will be the pre-LWC question that actually we shared earlier on. So the example that I gave earlier on is just one example. Okay, it can be based on any context. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Any other question that you all would like to ask or clarify? Okay. All right. I mean, if there's no further question, then maybe we will not hold back everyone. But do feel free to let us know if there's anything that you would like to get in touch with us to actually understand a bit better, or to anything you can just email to us. Okay, so we'll be more than happy to actually assist everybody. Okay. Yeah. So thank you everyone. Thank you all parents, for taking the time to join us. Okay. So we hope to see you all around. Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay. Good night.